Hey guys, welcome back to Sacred Keys for the week beginning August 2nd, 2026. Sacred Keys are three symbols that God may highlight through a word, visual image, an impression, or an inner knowing, offering us spiritual guidance and a point of prayerful reflection for the week ahead. So this week's three sacred keys are harmony, treasure, and the veil torn. Together, these keys speak of a movement from alignment to recognition of value, and then to an unveiling. Something first comes into balance. Then, what is precious becomes easier to recognize, and finally, what is hidden, obscured, or difficult to understand begins to open. The overall message for this week is, as alignment comes, what is valuable becomes visible, and what was hidden begins to open. This doesn't feel primarily like a message of struggle. It feels more like clarity after preparation. A revealing that becomes possible because something within us or around us has first been brought into greater harmony. So the first sacred key is harmony. Harmony carries the energy of peace, balance, agreement, inner order, and right relationship. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything around us is perfect. It means that what is within us is no longer being pulled into several opposing directions. Harmony can come when the mind, heart, spirit, and actions begin moving together. When what we say we desire starts aligning with how we live. When our decisions begin reflecting what we truly value. When our inner world settles enough for us to hear what was difficult to recognize in the noise. Sometimes we ask God for a revelation while remaining emotionally scattered, mentally overloaded, or spiritually unsettled. But clarity may not always come through greater effort. Sometimes it comes when we become still enough for the pieces to settle into their proper places. So harmony may involve bringing order to something practical. It could be your schedule, your environment, your priorities, your finances, your relationships, or the way you are caring for yourself. It may also involve releasing internal conflict. Perhaps one part of you knows it's time to move forward while another part is afraid. One part recognizes your value while another continues questioning whether you are even worthy. One part trusts what God has shown you while another keeps searching for endless confirmation. Harmony doesn't mean silencing every concern. It means allowing truth, wisdom, and peace to become the governing voice. And so the second sacred key is treasure. Treasure represents hidden value, stored riches, something precious that already exists but may not yet have fully been recognized, claimed, or opened. This treasure could represent a gift, wisdom gained through experience, a creative idea, an opportunity, provision from God, a relationship, a calling, spiritual inheritance, or something meaningful that has been quietly developing beneath the surface. What stands out is that the treasure is not necessarily being created this week. It may already be present. The invitation is to recognize it. Sometimes we overlook what's valuable because it arrived in an ordinary form. We look for something dramatic while ignoring the small beginning. We search far away for something that has already been placed within our hands. We dismiss our own wisdom because it was gained through difficulty. We undervalue a gift because it comes naturally to us. We assume that because something has not yet been widely seen, it's not significant. But hidden doesn't mean absent. Unrecognized doesn't mean without value, and delayed visibility doesn't mean that nothing has been developing. The key may be asking, what have you been carrying that you haven't already fully honored? What has God already placed within you? What wisdom have you gained that you continue treating as ordinary? Or what opportunity, relationship, idea, or resource may be more valuable than it first appears? The treasure key reminds us that sometimes revelation begins with learning how to value what is already present. And then we have the third sacred key, which is the veil torn. So a veil separates what is visible from what is hidden. It can represent mystery, limited access, obscured understanding, or something that has yet to be fully revealed. A torn veil represents opening, access, disclosure, greater understanding. What was once difficult to see may become clearer. What felt closed may begin opening. What was sensed but not understood may finally receive language. In Scripture, the tearing of the temple veil represented a profound removal of separation and a new openness of access to God Himself. Within this week's message, it may also point toward a personal unveiling. You may begin to understand why something happened. You may recognize the value of something you once dismissed. A truth may become clearer. A connection may suddenly make sense, or an opportunity that once seemed hidden may become visible. This doesn't necessarily mean every question will be answered immediately. Revelation often unfolds in layers. But the veil suggests that something is becoming more accessible than it was before. You may not have to force the answer. You may simply need to remain present enough to notice what is opening. Now, personally for you, these keys may be speaking to an area in your life where clarity has felt delayed. You may have sensed that something meaningful was present, but you couldn't fully see its purpose, value, or next step. The sequence of these matters as well. So first we have harmony, and then treasure, and then the veil torn. This suggests that inner alignment may prepare you to recognize what has been hidden in plain sight. When we are anxious, hurried, or emotionally divided, we may overlook what is valuable. We can misread timing, dismiss quiet opportunities, ignore our own wisdom, or search for answers in places that only create more confusion. But as peace returns, perception changes. What seemed ordinary may begin to appear sacred. What felt insignificant may reveal greater purpose. What seemed disconnected may form a pattern. And what was hidden may begin presenting itself naturally. So this week may not be about chasing revelation. It may be about creating the inner conditions in which revelation can be received. This could mean stepping back from unnecessary noise, allowing a decision to settle before acting, making space for prayer, reflection, or journaling, bringing your priorities back into alignment, or becoming honest about something you already know but have been reluctant to acknowledge. So ask yourself these questions. Where do I need greater harmony? What am I overlooking because I expected it to look different? What already carries value in my life? What may be opening now that I'm becoming ready to see it? Now, collectively, these keys may be speaking to a time when many people are searching for answers, meaning, direction, and truth. There is no shortage of information, but information and revelation are not the same. We can receive more facts while becoming less clear. We can hear many opinions while losing touch with our own inner wisdom. We can remain constantly connected while becoming spiritually fragmented. The key of harmony may be inviting us to become less reactive, to listen before we speak, to resist allowing every new headline, argument, or emotional reaction to determine our inner atmosphere, because peace is not passive. Harmony can become a place of discernment. It allows us to recognize what carries genuine value instead of being captivated by what is merely loud. The treasure key may also point towards gifts, wisdom that has been overlooked within communities, people whose voices were dismissed, truths that were buried, ways of living that were considered too simple, spiritual wisdom that was present all along but couldn't be appreciated while attention was fixed elsewhere. The veil torn suggests that what has been concealed may become harder to ignore. Greater clarity may come around systems, relationships, beliefs, or cultural patterns. But revelation shouldn't only make us feel informed. It should invite us into greater integrity. When something becomes visible, we are responsible for how we respond to what we now see. One of the strongest messages in these keys is that peace is not separate from revelation. Peace may be the environment in which revelation becomes easier to receive. This doesn't mean that God only speaks when life is peaceful. God can reach us in the middle of disruption, a crisis, and times of uncertainty. But inner stillness can help us recognize what He's saying without confusing it with fear, urgency, or projection. Sometimes the answer is already present, but we're too overwhelmed to see it. Sometimes the treasure is already near, but our expectations prevent us from valuing it. Sometimes the veil is already beginning to open, but we're looking for revelation to arrive in a different form. Harmony helps us notice. It creates room. It allows us to receive rather than constantly striving to produce an answer. So this week, do not assume that movement must always feel forceful. Do not underestimate the revelation that can come through quietness. Do not confuse stillness with inactivity. Something important may be arranging itself beneath the surface. Now here's a practical practice for this week for you. So this week, I want you to choose one area of your life that feels unsettled, unclear, or divided. Instead of immediately trying to solve it, sit with these 3 questions. First question is, what would harmony look like here? Then we have, what value, gift, or resource is already present? And then, what am I now becoming able to see? Write down what comes to you. Don't put pressure on yourself to produce a dramatic answer. Notice the small insight, the recurring thought, the quiet recognition, the thing you keep returning to. Then consider whether one practical action would support greater alignment. Perhaps you need to organize something. Have an honest conversation. Protect time for quiet. Acknowledge your own gift. Revisit an idea or stop dismissing something simply because it has yet to be fully revealed. The action may be small, but small acts of alignment can prepare us for greater clarity. The scripture for this week is Matthew 6:21. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. This scripture invites us to consider what we recognize as valuable and where we are placing our attention, devotion, and energy. Treasure is not only something we possess, it's also something we honor. When our hearts become aligned with what is true and sacred, we begin recognizing richness that was already present but previously overlooked. A second scripture that beautifully supports the key of revelation, which is the veil torn, is 2 Corinthians 3:16. Whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. There is a movement here toward openness, nearness, and clearer spiritual sight, not through force, but through turning, through alignment, through presence. So our affirmation for this week is, I welcome harmony within and around me. I honor the treasure already entrusted to me. and I remain open to the truth, clarity, and revelation that God is bringing into view. I'm Quistin DeLarise, founder of the Path of Presence. Thank you for joining me for this week's Sacred Keys. I would love to know how these 3 symbols speak most to you this week. Take care, and I will see you next time.